Hey guys, what's going on? Steven back again, and I'm back with another Walking Dead video. So I am back with another In the Mind of a Villain video. And this video focuses all on Negan. And this is by the channel In the Mind of a Villain. I gotta say, these videos are really good. I've been enjoying these videos a lot. I've already done one on Shane and the Governor. Both really cool, learning why do these characters do the things they do, what makes them tick and stuff like that. It's been very interesting. You know, Shane is a very complex character and stuff like that. You know, he just adapted to things, obviously faster than Rick, because he's been living in that world where, Rick was in a coma and didn't know what was going on. He did think, Shane did think sometimes violence is the answer, but not always. After Yes had hit Carol and stuff like that, he dragged him over and beat the shit out of him, stuff like that. But then look at the other side when he had Jim. Jim was having a heat stroke and stuff like that, digging the holes. He tried to talk Jim down. Yeah, Jim didn't swing the shovel or something like that at him, and then I think it was Shane who tackled him, and then they tied him up and stuff like that. And then he tried to, reason with him, hey, what's going on? You're all right. Why are you digging these holes and stuff like that? So it wasn't always just, violence is always the answer. So, I mean, that made him a very interesting character. The Governor was another one. Why did he do a lot of the things he do? He wanted to basically, hold on to his power and stuff. When he went and ambushed, the soldiers and stuff like that, he didn't want to take any chances. Well, maybe these soldiers will just pass right by our city and ignore us and don't even find us. What if they do find us? What if they attack us? Don't know. Or what if I bring them in and then all of a sudden they overthrow me? I don't know. I don't want to take any of those chances. I'm going to kill them all. Better safe than sorry, because you don't know. I mean, it's the end of the world. Are they actually going to follow orders? What if they did meet up with their captain and then their captain was like, hey, thanks for the medical attention and stuff like that. Now we're overtaking you. There's no chain of command anymore. These are my men, and now we're taking over, and we're going to kill you or imprison you or banish you or whatever, and the Governor didn't want to take any of those chances, better safe than sorry. So, I mean, it was very interesting. Negan is going to be very interesting too, because I kind of want to see an idea of what was the reason for basically all the saviors, when we were first meeting him, being like, I'm Negan. What was that all about? Was that a confidence booster or something like that? I don't know, all the people he took in, did they not know how to fight walkers and stuff? Were they very timid and, I don't want to fight this and stuff like that. No, I can't do these. I can't fight these walkers. I can't kill these guys and stuff. And then they see, here's this big dude, leather jacket, barbed wire baseball bat and stuff like that, just taking him out and stuff like that. And I'm Negan, and maybe that gave them the confidence, I'm Negan, I'm like that dude right over there, I can do this. Was that a reason, or was it something else? I don't know, but I've always been curious about that. So anyways, let's get on to the video and jump into the mind of Negan. Here we go.
Hey folks, in this entry we'll be taking a look at Negan from The Walking Dead, specifically covering his villainous arc in the series from seasons 6 to 8, as well as the special episode in season 10. Arguably the most captivating of The Walking Dead's antagonists, Negan ranks among the class of villains that many hate to love, in large part due to the magnetic charm of Jeffrey Dean Morgan bringing the character to life on the small screen.
Please pass the bread.
A callous and self-absorbed villain so utterly consumed with his greed that he subjugates everyone around him to serve his will, living a life of pleasure at the expense of others. As usual, in the current state of the walker-infested world, the dead aren't the real threat. but the living are.
Mm-hmm.
We've seen many characters adopting a radical change from their former selves in the name of survival. Negan's change is perhaps one of the most dramatic, going from a high school gym teacher to the snide and cruel dictator of an oppressive cult.
Yeah,
In his
that's true.
past life, Negan derived a sense of purpose from his job, and being able to shape kids under his care to become better functioning members of society, a purpose which has become distorted at present. Beyond the pleasantries of the surface, however, Negan has two outlying issues that plague him. A certain promiscuity seen in his marital unfaithfulness to his wife Lucille,
Yep.
and an instance of uncontrolled rage when he assaulted a man who disrespected their favorite love song at a bar.
So he's always
These
kind of had a little
flaws
bit of that
aside,
violent
Negan
tendency.
remains largely the same man he was at the start of the outbreak. A loving husband caring for his wife recovering from cancer.
But
The
then when she
pivotal moment
died,
of his transformation would come at
all
the
that
point
changed.
of his wife's demise,
Yep.
tragically by her own hand, out of the belief that her husband had abandoned her. Then there's also the resentment against the biker gang for delaying him in getting back to his wife.
Mm-hmm.
While it's probably not the only factor, Negan's encounter with the biker gang helped reinforce a new mindset, the notion that in the current state of the world, you earn what you take, a sentiment that he shares with Dwight later on. Of course, I'd be remiss if I didn't mention that with the collapse of civilization,
Oh, yeah.
it has become a common occurrence for groups of less honorable people to pillage, plunder, and even kill other groups in the name of survival. And everyone by this point has a few screws loose, so to speak. As we can imagine, the death of Lucille flooded Negan's mind with immense sorrow, loneliness, and most of all, shame.
Yeah,
Shame
that was
from
the
fact that he couldn't
big
face
moment.
the thought of losing his wife, inadvertently resulting in her taking her own life, which we can assume to have been plaguing him throughout the earlier seasons, as he only managed to process it fully in season 10. In all this, therein lies a recurring theme with Negan, and he himself says this as much in his reflection at the fireplace, admitting that
Oh
he
yeah,
was
that
a
was a
coward,
good episode.
that he has a tendency to take the easy way out, choosing to run from his emotions instead of processing them. He couldn't bear the thought of losing his wife, so he fled from that possibility. To cope with the resulting shame, he desensitized himself to the point where he didn't feel anything, a self-defense mechanism to shield himself from the overwhelming shame. But while it served the purpose of easing the pain, this
Such a
act
good
of numbing
episode.
himself led to a hardened conscience, turning him into a callous, cruel, unempathetic, and selfish man. Negan's transformation could be largely attributed to an overcompensation for the guilt and shame he has yet to process, and when you take into account the current absence of all legal structure and authority, the lack of capital punishment, the fact that everyone takes by force, and we have the recipe for a man who is now free to indulge in his most carnal desires, living a life of luxury to mask his inner wounds. If we apply that to his time in the Saviors, this tendency to take the easy way out bears true as well. After all, it's easier to extort and steal from others than it is to gather your own resources.
Fair
And
point.
it's easier to rule out of fear and intimidation than it is to acquire loyalty through altruism and compassion. His new approach to life can be summed up in the statement of having as much enjoyment as possible.
If you got fear, no
This
one's going to
approach
challenge you.
is foremost reflected in his choice of attire, a black leather jacket clad with boots resembling that of a biker, an indulgence which he dabbled in before the world turned upside down, but has now become his recurring look. When we do encounter Negan in his time in the Saviors, we find a man who is seldom without a smile, both publicly in front of large groups and also in his more private moments, signifying that this isn't an inconsistent persona or a facade. He is genuinely having the time of his life. Unfortunately for the people around him, Negan has his fun at their expense, and
Yep.
it's a costly one, even taking sadistic pleasure in their suffering. What makes Negan also more prone to his cruel methods is also the fact that unlike most of the protagonists, he has no social support, or at least none significant enough for him to rely on for an emotional pillar.
Yeah, it's
And
true.
as we've seen in the
Not like
series,
Dwight
those
and
who are more isolated, like Michonne and Morgan,
Stephen Hawking's character,
naturally tend to
Simon.
be a bit more unhinged before their integration back into some form of society. In the absence of any meaningful social connection, Negan turns to the only option he has left, projecting his emotional needs onto an inanimate object as a coping mechanism. In his case, a
Lucille.
wooden baseball bat wrapped in barbed wire, which he affectionately dubs as Lucille to create a representation of his deceased wife. Negan's reliance on his baseball bat is a testament to the fractured state of his mind, and likely a manifestation of the unprocessed guilt he has over his wife. He genuinely does have an emotional attachment to it, as seen by how touchy and possessive he is over it, and by his
That was a
cry
cool
of
moment.
despair when being denied the bat during his stay in prison. In terms of an emotional bond, perhaps there is some similarity in Negan's attachment to the bat as Tom Hanks' character has with Wilson in Castaway.
Oh, yeah.
But beyond a coping mechanism,
Didn't think of that.
Lucille also becomes a prop for Negan to justify his atrocities, often used by him as an excuse for bloodshed under the concept of quenching her so-called thirst. With his newfound mindset, Negan would quickly rise up the ranks of his community, replacing the former leader whom he described as someone who allowed people to be weak, hinting at the possibility
Really? I
that
didn't
they
remember
suffered
that.
some misfortune under his leadership.
I don't
To
remember that
prevent
part.
such a scenario from occurring again, Negan would swing to the other extreme, citing his heinous methods as the noble means of making his people strong, a callback to his former purpose of nurturing kids as a gym teacher.
Mm-hmm.
Negan's choice to label his group as the Saviors is another key aspect of his personality, his savior complex. Repeatedly throughout his dealings with the communities, Negan justifies his actions under the notion of quote-unquote saving others. In some twisted sense, that is somewhat true, as it's certainly better to have four walls and a roof over your head, plus other basic necessities, than taking your chances out there on your own.
I mean, that is
I'm
true.
sure there are many individuals like Morales who have found refuge with the Saviors amidst the chaos of the outside world and are actually grateful to be taken in.
Right.
And on another plus point, while it may be oppressive, Negan and the Saviors offer
I mean, it's
something
better than
sorely
nothing.
lacking in the current world, that
Structure.
of civilization and order.
Yeah,
There are rules
okay, yeah.
that govern behavior in the Savior's community,
Mm-hmm.
rules that maintain some level of human decency in a time when everyone is free to indulge in their most carnal desire.
Right, so it's not just all lawlessness and stuff like that. You know, yes, there were rules, as twisted and interesting as they were, but, you know, it's better than, all right, do whatever you want, you know?
In the absence of consequences, although it's an enforcement that is often barbaric, such as Negan's fatal stabbing of the man who attempted to force himself on Sasha.
Yep.
But however noble Negan's intentions may be, they are countered by what could be said to be his greatest character flaw, his all-consuming selfishness. When you get down to it, the Saviors are essentially a cult, and Negan is their
pretty much,
figurehead,
yeah.
their object of worship to
Yep,
whom
the
they
kneeling,
must kneel
yep.
in his presence and pledge their undying loyalty to. Negan's way of maintaining this loyalty is nefarious, but certainly effective, going right down to the identity of his subordinates. Everyone from greatest to weakest are to identify themselves as Negan, and this act only serves to reinforce the notion that everything they are, down to their innermost thoughts and desires, are to be subject to the will of their dictator.
Oh, okay.
Like all other communities, Negan and his saviors need resources to survive.
Mm-hmm.
But as Michonne mentions at one point, Negan ordered the world his way. Instead of producing their own economy, Negan takes the easy way out and bullies the other communities to brutally extort from them like a mafioso gangster, presenting himself as the solution to the problem that he himself created. In the words of Daryl regarding their approach, it's not about getting by, It's about getting it all. So despite his so-called intention of saving others, Negan is fully aware of how ruthless his methods are, and he himself openly hints at this by his own labeling of himself as the big bad wolf from the story of the Three Little Pigs. But it's not just the other communities that suffer from Negan's selfishness, as we find its effects clear and present within the community of the Saviors
his own
themselves.
people.
Perhaps the clearest example of Negan's self-absorption is his collection of wives,
Yeah.
seized from other men to satisfy his insatiable lust, with him going so far as to punish the husbands by scarring their face with a hot iron should they try to interlope with their wives. Which brings us to Negan's system of reward and punishment within his own group, and in his dealings with the other communities. To run a tight ship, Negan understands the importance of promoting positive behavior and coming down hard on any insubordination.
Like he did with Simon.
He is indeed a
when
sadist,
he, killed all the junkyard people.
It is for this reason that Negan stops his subordinates from dishing out unwarranted beatings on the oppressed, because he knows that if they're punished either way, then sooner or later they'll realize they have no incentive to be compliant. And with the earlier case of
They got nothing else
scarring,
to lose, so
Negan
rise up.
deliberately does it publicly to burn the consequence of disobedience into the minds of his people, serving to fuel the fear they have of him. To keep his own people occupied and motivated, Negan introduced a point system, where his people are segregated into hierarchies and have to slog for daily necessities, while he and his selected lieutenants live like kings over them. To justify this unfair distribution, in his own words he says that's an economy. Some people win, some people lose. But that's always easier to say when you're the one at the top looking down on those with less privileges than yourself.
Yep.
The crux of Negan's character is seen in his eventual conflict with Rick and his group. First impressions last, and Negan is a man who is all too familiar with this truth. In his introduction to Rick's group, we find him displaying a masterclass
And
in
Negan definitely
fear.
made a first impression, and so did, I guess you can say, so did Rick leave a first impression against Negan, not backing down, not, lowering his eyes and lowering his head and, always still, which is why it took all that time to break Rick down. That was probably an impression on Negan, I really got to break this guy down. Like everybody else in this group was just, hunched over and stuff like that. Yeah, you did have Abraham at the last minute. Like, yeah, go ahead. Bring it on, standing proud, and I'll take the hit. I'll be the one, and you also had Rick who, despite everything that happened to him, just wouldn't break. So I'm sure that was an impression on Negan.
And intimidation, from the ominous threats he makes to the deliberate slow pacing to let the fears stew in the minds of his victims. His swagger and the way he contorts his body, brandishing the instrument of his wrath while bearing a look of mischief on his face. In other times, this intimidation comes in the form of Negan's mouth whistle, foreboding a grim sense of trouble before his arrival.
Whistle.
From his interactions with his victims, it's plain to see that Negan is a man who derives joy from toying with his victims, invading their personal space and relishing in the discomfort he causes them to squirm in. It's fearful enough when you're being threatened by a callous murderer, but it's a far more unsettling event when the person doing harm does it with such casualness and with such glee. His preferred choice of execution, namely bludgeoning by a baseball bat, is a particularly slow and needlessly painful process.
Oh, yeah.
Not just for the victims, but for those watching.
Like
Given
Glenn
the
and Abraham.
conflict between the Saviors and Rick's group, it's important that we cover a crucial point, that of blame, as to whether Rick was guilty of starting the friction between the groups given his attack on the satellite outpost. The answer to that is a maybe, as the Saviors by then already had a reputation for being vicious, such
Yeah.
as the biker gangs
True. Yep.
hostile
Oh
encounter with
yeah, because we met
Sasha
them
and
first. Yep.
Abraham. Rick's
So
group
already they were
also
kind of
had
already
information that
threatening.
Hilltop was being extorted by the Saviors,
Yep.
with Gregory being threatened to be killed for not meeting their tribute quota. So it's
So they were
clear from
already
Rick's point of view that the
already a
Saviors are a
villain.
bunch of unsavory
Yep.
characters, and perhaps it's only a matter of time before they become plagued by them as well. Rick's attack could be said to have some element of self-defense, but with that said, his choice to simply
True.
eliminate everyone in their sleep is morally questionable at best. Sure, it's the most practical solution that would preserve his own team,
Right.
but then there's the possibility that there were innocent people at the outpost who didn't deserve to die.
True.
But
They just didn't
regardless,
want to.
even if Rick's choice was
They
morally
had no
gray,
choice. They had to be there.
Negan's
Not
actions
like
are
they
far
wanted to do
worse in
what they had to
comparison,
do.
being numb to the suffering of others and the cruelty of his actions, such as forcing Rosita to look upon Abraham's bloody corpse and his distasteful comments as he bashes Glenn.
Mm-hmm.
Sure, it was a better outcome that he spared Rick's group instead of killing them all, but it's only so that they can serve him.
Yep. Provide
with
for
Negan
them.
telling Rick the
You
mantra
can't provide for me if
you
you're
answer
dead.
me, you provide for me, you belong to me. And in his later attempt to keep Simon from killing the scavengers, we hear Negan's philosophy from his own mouth, the sentiment that people are a resource. This remains one of his precious few redeeming traits, that his greed would stay his hand from murder. Negan isn't the worst of the saviors, with that title probably more suitable for someone like Simon,
Yeah.
someone equally deranged but far more destructive.
Oh yeah.
But beyond providing for him, Negan's choice to keep his enemies alive also stems from a certain appeal to his ego. It's one thing to conquer your enemy using force, it's another achievement to be able to subjugate them and keep them as living trophies as testament of your victory.
Didn't
It's for
think of
this
that.
reason
Yeah.
that Negan takes an affinity to Daryl, choosing to break his spirit in order to indoctrinate him into his cult. This is repeated with Coral, where Negan himself admits that it's more fun to break him than to kill him, even though Coral had already displayed hostile intent in trying to assassinate him. Apart from the fun, we see that Negan's sparing of Coral's life stems from his desire for a familial bond, a yearning
with him
which
with-
remains despite how immoral
Him
he
with
has
kids
become.
and being a gym teacher.
Also previously hinted at with his projection of Lucille onto his baseball bat. Coral becomes somewhat of a surrogate son, and it's a testament to the impact that Coral had on him, with the cold-hearted Negan displaying a rare instance of regret.
See, killing Carl was just terrible. Like, can you just imagine, like, the interactions we could have had? You know, season 10, season 11, Carl and Negan. Negan's out, you know, doing all this stuff, and just the stuff we missed out. I mean, it would have been interesting to see what would have, you know, Carl and Negan's relationship would have been. Would have been, I guess it was kind of projected with Judith in a way, you know, kind of like a deranged uncle type situation, you know. I guess that would have been like the Carl Negan relationship if, like I said, Carl was still alive and it just got transferred over to Judith. You know, but yeah, things we missed out on because let's kill Carl for reasons.
Upon learning of his passing,
Yep.
as well as hesitating in combat when Rick uses Coral's last wish against him. Despite his atrocities, Negan maintains a misplaced sense of innocence, telling Father Gabriel that he never killed anyone who didn't deserve it. While Negan is a master at controlling and oppressing his enemies, a major flaw in his mindset is his misunderstanding of human loyalty. Sure, you can take everything a man has, degrade and humiliate him, as was the case with Dwight, with Negan taking away his wife and scarring his face.
Yep.
But no one with sound reasoning would expect that such a person could ever be fully loyal to you.
No.
And if they somehow appear to be, You can bet your last dollar that they are doing so with gritted teeth and would backstab you when the time is right.
Mm-hmm.
It
Just
might be
waiting for
the
the right
easy
moment
thing
to
to
strike.
do, to threaten and extort people into serving your will, but therein also lies the danger. When your victims are so miserable that they have nothing to lose in fighting back, the only
What's to stop him from
foreseeable outcome
turning
is
against
all
you?
out war. A war which Negan struggles to win, as by this point Negan has made himself out to be public enemy number one in the eyes of all other communities. Eventually, the situation becomes irreparable, and Negan becomes acceptable of wiping them all out. But by then, Negan receives his timely defeat,
Yep.
born out of Eugene's betrayal from having had enough of
There's that
cowering in fear.
loyalty.
Fortunately, Negan's story doesn't end there, and his testimony bears witness to the truth that sometimes even the worst of us can reform for the better. Given the magnitude of his crimes, it's a long and arduous journey, one that may not eventuate in full reconciliation with his former victims, and one that he will always seek to make reparations for the rest of his life.
Oh, okay. Ending there. Okay. Wow. That was yeah, that was really interesting. That was another really good video. I thoroughly enjoyed that one, getting in the mind of Negan. And once his wife died, well, granted, he always had somewhat of a violent nature, if you will, like in that episode, what was it, that season 10 extra episodes and stuff like that, when he beat up that dude who changed their song and stuff like that, so there's always been that violence in there somewhere. And then, of course, once Lucille died and stuff like that, that was basically just the snapping, the moment he just lost it. And then, of course, the bikers, killing the bikers and stuff like that, because had they not held him up, he could have got back. He could have been there with his wife before she, ended things. But bikers held him up. She took her own life. He snapped. He went. He got revenge on the bikers because this was all your fault. You kept me here. You detained me for all this time. I couldn't make it back to her, and that was the end of it. That started, that started everything. And then, not handling, his emotions and stuff like that, just bottled everything up. And then just being who he became, just letting his new personality take over, if you will. You did see some redeeming qualities. Yes, he took in all these people and stuff like that. He did give them sanctuary, 4 walls and a roof. There were rules. You had supplies and food, despite you're taking it from other communities by force, basically. But you had that. It's either that or there's the road. Good luck. Go take your chances. Commanding loyalty. Like you said, I'm sure a lot of them were, only loyal just through gritting their teeth and, oh yes, Negan, just gritting your teeth the entire time. And, like if the moment ever struck, yeah, I would absolutely turn on him in a heartbeat, and then seeing the interesting relationship with him and Carl, and like you said, some of the him being a gym teacher and having those moments and stuff with Carl, which were sadly cut short, because like I said, we had to kill Carl because reasons. Yeah, one of the worst decisions ever made on that show. Let's kill him off, because whatever. But But yeah, like I said, it still would have been interesting, if Carl was still alive, Coral, um, to see him and Negan's interactions, especially in season 10 and season 11, that would have been interesting. We did see a little bit of it with Judith and stuff like that, so I think Judith just kind of took Carl's place and stuff like that. But you saw they had, a fun little relationship, friendship, frenemy, whatever, him helping her with her, like, homework and stuff like that, and, language, I mean, I guess that was, cool, but it still would have been better to see, like, Carl and stuff like that, and I don't know. I gotta watch that video, What If Carl Survived? I know there's another video, I forget which channel it is, but What If Carl Survived that? I gotta watch, because that's gonna be interesting to see. But, yeah, Negan, very interesting character. But, yeah, so there we go. So I don't want to ramble on too long here. I've already done enough talking as it is. But yeah, this was a great video. This was awesome. I've truly enjoyed these videos, in the mind of a villain, what makes these villains tick, why do they do the things they do, type of stuff, which is very interesting. I gotta see if there's one on Alpha. Hopefully he did one on Alpha, because that'd be pretty cool. But yeah, so there we go. In the mind of a villain, Negan, Saviors from The Walking Dead. So I hope you guys enjoyed the video. If you did, hit that thumbs up button. That'd be awesome. Remember, feel free to subscribe to my channel. Follow me on social media. Links in the description box below. And of course, leave me all your thoughts and comments. What did you guys think about the video? Did you like it? Did you not like it? What do you think about this little series I'm doing, the In the Mind of a Villain? Yeah, and if there is any other videos you guys want me to check out, feel free to leave a link down below, and I'll be glad to check it out, do a video on it and stuff like that, because I enjoy these. So other than that, yeah, just stick around. More videos are on the way, and I will see you guys next time.